Hello, fellow griever. You have found the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast, and I am Melissa, your host. I am with you on this journey because my 21-year-old son, Alex, died by suicide on August 7th of 2016. Since launching this podcast in late 2020, I have followed my heart and expanded the Leftover Pieces to include books and an online community where I host Zoom support groups every week. It is there, in this community, that I lead other parents who have lost a child by suicide from survival toward hope and into healing. The website is also a resource hub, a connecting point for all survivors of suicide loss. You can find me, ways to connect with me, and links to everything that I'm doing in the community on my website, theleftoverpieces.com. Know that I'm always open to suggestions and feedback. And if you know someone that I should connect with to be on the podcast, please let me know that as well. So now, I invite you to join me for real conversations, candid talk on hard topics surrounding the loss of our loved ones by suicide. I talk to other loss survivors, mental health experts, advocates, and on alternate weeks, I offer shorter solo episodes where I go down the rabbit hole to discuss things that have been on my mind or possibly parts of my journey that I feel would be beneficial to share. Every week, we explore the questions that haunt us, seek the courage to uncover the healing tools within us, and offer the comfort of a community that we all need so very much. It's true that our hearts and lives have been shattered, but come along with me, and together, let's choose to find meaning and even happiness amid the leftover pieces before us. Welcome. Are you a fellow grieving mom? Do you find that you too often feel all alone and need someone to connect with, to really talk to, that truly understands what you're going through? Do you crave a community to walk alongside as you try to navigate this also impossible road? You should consider joining one of my mom's online Zoom support groups. There are monthly or weekly meetings depending on your needs and schedule. And because they're on Zoom, you can join from anywhere, anytime. And best of all, you can be in your comfy clothes in your own safe space when you do it. Come see how we do support differently here at The Leftover Pieces. Go to theleftoverpieces.com and click on the Get Support tab to register today. Hello and welcome. Today you have reached Season 4, Episode 38 of the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast, and I'm Melissa, your host. Today I'm sharing a conversation I had recently with a lovely woman named Abby Dart. Abby Dart is a mother of 5 and Steve Dart's widow. Professionally, she holds her BA in political science, her Juris Doctorate in law degree. She's a member of the California Bar and an executive director for Scenic Michigan, and has had an extensive political campaign career. Today, Abby and I's conversation centers around her as a suicide widow of 19 years. When her husband Steve died by suicide in 2004, her children were only 8, 10, 12, 13, and 17. And to lend a perspective on the 19 years that have passed, those same children are between the ages of 26 and 36. Because Steve was in the public eye, he was in politics, They had to figure out how to grieve publicly while trying to find private time as a family. Abby and I pack a lot into our time together, and this is an enlightening conversation for anybody who's lost someone to suicide. Abby and I talk about a myriad of things, everything from, obviously, those 5 kids, then and now, the stigma and the mental health. Abby and I both agree that we're not where we should be. We talk about the importance of support, not only of your family, but of your community after loss. We talk about her brokenness, even today, and the duality of living a life that's happy while still being a suicide loss survivor. We talk about her why, as to why, after 19 years, she's still talking about it. Like many of my conversations, this conversation is not just for widows. It's for any of us that have lost someone by suicide. I hope you will listen to our entire conversation, because as we finish up, Abby's final thoughts are definitely worth hearing. So without further ado, let's welcome Abby. Good morning, Abby. Welcome to the podcast. It is my absolute honor to have you here, and I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be a really powerful, enlightening one. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I agree. This is a really good opportunity to share my story and hopefully offer some solace to the listeners.
Yeah, I hope so too. And everybody heard in the introduction before this recording a little background about you. So I'd love to just start right now with you diving right in and telling us your lost story.
Absolutely. So a little bit of background about my husband, because I think to really understand somebody's death, you have to understand their life. So the brief version is my husband was the youngest of 4, only boy, 3 sisters. He grew up in East Lansing, Michigan, and he was considered to be sort of the golden child. He excelled in everything he did. He held a state record in the high hurdles. He was the running back, quarterback on the football team. So he had the opportunity, which he didn't do, to play for Michigan State football and even Notre Dame. He decided to go to Harvard. He was very concerned about, interested in having a good education. So he played football at Harvard. He went on to get his bachelor's at Harvard, went on to Oxford to get a master's in philosophy, and then back to Harvard Law School. After that, my husband, I think, was a Renaissance man. He decided that he wanted to try his hand at acting. So he went out to Los Angeles, Hollywood, where we met. And this is going to date me, but if your listeners remember, there was a show called Divorce Court. I don't know if anybody remembers that. And,
I do.
Yeah, okay.
But that's dating me too, so okay.
Yeah. So Divorce Court, actually, people don't know this. You had to be a real attorney, even though you were acting. So when I met Steve, I met him at a Hollywood party. I grew up in Los Angeles. He was acting. He was involved in politics. We're both lawyers, but I never practiced. I worked in the political arena. So to make a long story short, from Los Angeles, he was from Michigan. He didn't want to take the California bar exam, which is a very difficult exam. He was already a member of the Michigan bar. So we moved to Michigan. We had 5 children, and we ended up settling in a small town called Harbor Springs, where he had summered. And I'm talking small. I'm talking like 1,000 people in the town year round, and kind of a challenge for me coming from a big city. But when I tell you the lost story, I think your listeners will understand how sometimes it does take a village, and having a small community to help you, to guide you, to be support. It's much different than where I live now, which is New York City or Los Angeles. So my husband and I thought we had an exciting life, a good marriage, 5 wonderful children. And I would say that I didn't really notice signs of depression. I think that in my husband's case, he was very thoughtful, introspective. But when he turned 50, he started having trouble sleeping. He started suffering from anxiety. Some people might say, oh, maybe it was a midlife crisis. I don't know. But what I want to say is he had started a new legal position, and I think there was some stress there. But most important, he didn't want to see a doctor. He was very worried that if he saw a psychiatrist, his new employer would find out. Once again, he suffered from high blood pressure, but he wouldn't think twice about going to the doctor for medication. So that entire year that he was 50, I was really struggling to get him to see somebody. Sadly, by the time I did, he was not in a good place at all. He was still trying to work, but the psychiatrist and I were able to convince him to enter a hospital, which I'm not privy to name because we had some litigation. But let's just say that it's a hospital that's supposed to handle mental health, mental illness issues. And so I took him to the hospital and I said goodbye and I spoke to the staff, and it was my understanding that they were going to get him to a good place, get him to a safe place. What happened was that instead of getting to a safe place, he had gone involuntarily and he was able to voluntarily leave. Happens a lot. And the hospital said he was due to come back for an outpatient. And he might have shown up once, but they couldn't find him the next day. And I got a call that his nephew, he at that point was downstate where the hospital is located, had found him dead by suicide. So yeah, that was many years ago. That was in 2004.
And at that time, well, first of all, I don't care how many years it's been. That's always hard to talk about. And I appreciate and want to recognize your bravery for coming on and talking about this because, Abby, it's been a number of years and many people in your place might not be talking about it anymore. And yet I think it's so important to hear that this suicide death affects us for life. It's not something, and death in general does, but in the space we're talking about suicide loss. And there is something extra complicated about suicide loss that we know because we're living in this world. It is not death by cancer, which we can reason in our brain so much differently. And it is a complicated loss and it's a traumatic loss. And there's always complicating factors with it. But when you were talking, two of the things that I thought about was how often I hear about the two main issues that go side by side and why it's so important that especially those of us that are aware of what suicide loss does to a family, that we often get into the arena of tackling one of these two places, which is getting people to reach out is one of the issues in itself, meaning mental health empowerment, people feeling like they can say, my blood pressure's off. Oh, my brain's off, right? Like not having the stigma associated with this one because there isn't with this one. And so that's one hurdle. But then in talking about hurdles, when you're talking, but then there's the other hurdle, which is the deficiencies that exist from pre-college school, high school up in mental health care for us as a whole, as a nation. Our mental health care system has not caught up to where it needs to be. And to even look at where it was 20 years ago, I hear stories every day of deaths from suicide today in today's world that tell the same story you're telling about the deficiencies in mental health care.
Absolutely. I mean, you raised both points. I mean, I sadly don't think it's that much better. We talk about the stigma. And by the way, I tell people, a lot of people don't understand this, but I tell people it's not the depression that killed my husband. It's the stigma. Because I will say till the moment I die that had he sought treatment the way he did for his blood pressure early, he'd be alive today. So the stigma, as we know, it's still really bad. The other thing I want to say, and I think we'll talk about this perhaps later, is because of my background in politics, I call myself a shadow legislator. I always have these ideas of how we can improve the system. And I'm not in a position to make the decisions. But one of the things I tell people all the time is that when we have, and our children enter into school, they enter into elementary school, middle school, high school, they have to have vision tests, they have to have hearing tests. There's all sorts of things that we do to protect them. And in this day and age, there are mental health screenings. I mean, we're not in the dark ages. which can, at every step of the way, and I'm talking about middle school and high school and elementary school, can find, perhaps see something that others can't see, that even families can't see, that professionals can see. And whenever I mention this, people say, oh, well, oh no, parents won't want to have anything with brain health. That's going to scare them off. Well, I say, and you know this, what's worse, having a screening or having a death by suicide? So that's a whole nother discussion.
It is a whole nother discussion, but it brings, you're exactly right, because I actually get up on a little pedestal all the time and talk about how all of this prevention campaign work that we see done out in the mainstream world, where they talk about prevention, every suicide is 100% preventable, and they give the laundry list of the few signs that they've come up with. They've checked a box on their list and said, now we've put out public information, and everybody's going to be able to prevent all these suicides, because just like people have learned the signs of stroke and all those things, now they know when to recognize that their loved one's about to die by suicide. It's not that simple. The problem is those steps are exactly a public, they're a sexy campaign, if you will, right? And so the reality is we have to catch people. I say this all the time, before they are in crisis. Once they're in crisis, all bets are off. All bets are off, because that whole 100% thing, I'm sorry, I've lived in this world now for 7 years, and you've lived in it more than twice that long. That's not true. It's just not true. If we catch people before crisis, then we've destigmatized it. We've helped them with a long care plan. And two things came to mind when you were talking. I thought about something as simple as my daughter having an IEP in high school. She had an IEP because she had a very specific dyslexic-like reading disability that they recognized, because we were in a good school system and all the things very early on. She was in like second or third grade. So she started going to different class teachers, not special ed like they used to label it, just because you have a different way of, but they taught her all these skills. So she had known since she was young that she had this reading issue, and has never had a stigma about it, because even when she'd have to leave to go take tests the first few, she eventually didn't need the IEP, because they did a good enough job teaching her the skills to read thorough enough to not feel like she had to take her tests separately. But when she had the IEP in place, they would do that. They would accommodate her disability or learning difference, if you will. And it wasn't ever stigmatized. To this day, she's not stigmatized about it, because she's always lived with it. It's just part of life. We never stigmatized it. But then you go into things like you talking about how it is something we still hide from when it's a mental health situation. And it made me think, my listeners don't know, but you and I have had a little bit of a technical difficulty on my end getting this recording to happen. And so we rescheduled because I was having technical difficulty. So in the interim between our unsuccessful call and our successful call, I was watching an episode of Designated Survivor. And which was a series that was out like between 2016 and I think 2019 with Kiefer Sutherland about the catastrophic what if everybody gets blown up and there's designated survivor left. Well, this is like getting close to the end of the series because we're rewatching it. I watched that series like the months after Alex died, and as you can imagine, I don't remember it. So we decided that we liked it. We liked the premise enough that we wanted to start watching lately. Well, they're far enough in. Sorry, spoiler alert. If anybody wants to watch Designated Survivor, you might want to plug your ears for a minute. But his wife dies. The first lady dies at some point in a car accident. So he's dealing with complicated traumatic grief in the White House because she was killed en route back to the White House in a Secret Service vehicle, all the things. So then he's dealing with grief in the most important office in the world. And I found it extreme, and it just is weird with the timing of our call and last night watching that episode, because even for 2016, 17-ish, I thought the show I was surprised, did a really good job at talking about where the public was trying to scrutinize him. Part of Congress was trying to scrutinize him and say he needed to be out of office. They started proceedings to get him out of office because he wasn't competent enough. Because he lost his wife and he was grieving, and they uncovered some tapes with his therapist where he said he wasn't sure if he was fit to do the job anymore. Well, he had people come to his defense in this TV series. Many were trying to crucify him, and a few people came out and stood up in this series and said the way the acting went is players in his court said it's normal to suffer. It's normal to have these feelings. He's not depressed, and because the public and the Congress was trying to label him as, now incompetent. They're making mental health issues that are real, and they're making it incompetency instead of humanness. And that show put the humanity on Grief. They ended up making him, keeping him in office and competent. But the fight was all about the mental health stigma. It was interesting. It was a very good episode. Yeah, and so but to me, it highlights the differences of you talking about, like with my daughter's IEP, I feel like mental health, and you talked about if we just did that earlier on, that we can get there with kids if we just start talking about it and teaching them and screening for it and doing all these things when they're young.
Right, because a lot of kids fall through the cracks. And, super political, but a lot of people say, oh, well, we have a lot of school shootings. Okay, there's some kids that have some issues, right? Some anger issues, some mental health issues, perhaps. I mean, we have a lot of guns in this country. But once again, what's the fear of screening? And one more thing, I don't know if your kid did sports. My kids did sports, middle and high school. Well, they always had to have a sports physical, but I don't remember, and maybe it's changed. I'm dating myself. We're talking 20 years ago. I don't remember them doing any mental health screening. There is an opportunity. I always look for opportunities to catch our kids. Those are opportunities, once again, to get a conversation going. I mean, we could talk for hours.
You're right. My sons were both, they played football briefly, but they were both baseball players.
Right.
Alex in particular, which is very relevant for this conversation because I've gone to this place before as a mom. Alex in particular had 3 major concussions in his sports life. He had 2 in football and 1 in baseball. And it lends itself to that same school system. This isn't like he was hopping around schools. This was all in the same exact school system. Why was it not in his mental health records? Or we'll just say his health records, because if we want to destigmatize it, mental, physical, it's all our body. Our brain
it's all the same.
Right. So why was it not in his health records that he'd had a concussion when he has his second one? Not only are we checking his physical ability to play again, we should know enough about mental health now to know that he should have had some mental health screenings that went along with those concussions. I looked at him as his mom, Abby, and said, after the third one, you have another one, we're done. I'm sorry, son, but that's your brain. And I've done enough research myself to know now that this third one's happened, you can't get hit in the head like that again. And he's like, okay, mom, ignoring it like kids or whatever. Well, he graduated and didn't have another one, but they know now enough about the brain, and they knew then. That wasn't that many years ago.
No, CTE, which my husband played football.
So he had
a lot of hits. Absolutely. And I do think, of course, he played from the time, whatever it is, Pee Wee on through college. Of course, it had an impact. I mean, we know now. So, yes,
but agree. We want to put all that down. We want to bury all that and just say, it was me that said these injuries could affect you. Where was the school in saying this is his third concussion? And we think not only does he need this physical follow-up, but we know what this could do to his brain. You need to have these men. They don't do any of it. They don't care. They just want him back on the field.
Exactly. So
So we sidestep for a minute. That's okay. Yeah. That's what happens here at the Leftover Pieces. But I would love to take a step back to 19. Is it 19 or has it been a full 20 now? What date did you receive?
Well, it would be, so let me think about this. 2004, November 7th, 2004. So we're getting there. We're getting to 20 years. Hard to believe.
So, I know I hear you. So at that time, your kids were 8, 10, 12, 13, and 17, if I'm remembering what you told me right.
Right.
And so now to rattle those off, your kids are at 26, 29, 31, 32, and 36. So I do that so that the listeners get a real idea of putting the age on, because we all live in these forever places where Alex is forever 21. So to realize your kids have gone from the youngest being 8 to 26 and the oldest from being 17 to 36, there's a very long time, yet that feels very short to you some days, I'm sure, that you guys have been living with this as a family. So talk to me about whatever you want to share with people about what it was like in the days dealing with 5 young kids who lost their dad, alongside you dealing with losing your husband and life partner. And then talk a little bit about what you've done over the years and where you are now. And that's a broad thing, so we may have to take it in bites, but I'd love for you to start to talk about how that was for your family then and now.
So back then, first of all, it's interesting that you mentioned all the years. Well, I still think of my husband as 51. That's how
Right.
old he was when he
Right.
died, and I was 48. And I can't even imagine him. Well, I'm 67 now, so he would be 70. So anyway, oh my gosh. Well, I would say those years, right when he died, I mean, kind of a blur. I know your listeners understand. Oh boy, I don't know how I got through even the first year, just trying to be there for my children. And I had to work. I mean, there was no two ways about it. So here I am trying to work, trying to make sure the kids had some sense of, when I say normalcy, I don't want it to sound the wrong way. There's nothing normal about what I went through and Steve's death by suicide. But my children, they just had one childhood. And I felt it was incumbent upon me to keep up the sports, keep up the activities. It was brutal. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was brutal.
This isn't the place. I don't do sugar coating, so you're in the right place, Abby.
There was a lot. There were many, certainly in the beginning, that I just wanted to curl up in a ball in my bed, which I did. Now, I had mentioned, and I think this is interesting and was very helpful. So this happened in a very small community, a community where, as I said, about 1,000 people in the city, maybe 5,000 in the surrounding area. We knew everybody. There probably wasn't a person didn't know. There's good and bad to that.
Yes.
You might want to hide as a student, as a child. You might want to hide and not have everybody know everything. My husband had run for office, so he was considered in the legal world as a public figure. And what that means, and some of your listeners might know that, is that the press can deal with him differently. And the local paper actually printed some very specific details about his death. And I approached them and I said, we're in the community. This just seems very unfair. Oh, well, he's a public figure. We deserve to know why, why? So
why?
Why? So that was devastating. I think it was hard for all of my children to have everybody know that. But the flip side is the support. The support. One thing stands out in the first probably month or few weeks after Steve died. The track team, when you got a small town, local sports,
everything, especially at the high school level.
Yeah, at the track team, I think they had just won states. Anyway, they all came over with food. The track team stopped by. And I mean, it sends chills right now just to show their support. So as hard as it was, the community really rallied. And I was so amazed by the outpouring of support that I remember, I can't find it now, but I wrote a letter we had a very local paper, the Harbor Light. And I wrote a letter thanking everybody because everybody was just there for us. Now, the years went by, and I have to say that my kids, they did well in school. They all went off to college. They talked about it. I would say my oldest son talked about it a lot more. The youngest was only 8 when Steve died. The oldest talked about it a lot. I think he struggled a little bit in his first years of college, understandably. But now I think this is interesting. And I don't know if it was Steve's death. We're incredibly close. I have a feeling, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I have a feeling that when you go through a really traumatic event, a number of things can happen. Perhaps you get close and you form your circle. And perhaps I know cases where people didn't, but tore them apart. I mean, our family unit was definitely broken for a while, but now we just took a family vacation together. Now I have a grandchild. My oldest son's married. I'd say we're closer than ever. So there is hope in the passage of time. I think about Steve every day. I think about everything he missed and is missing. It's not there for our grandchild. I dream about him. I have not gotten remarried. So personally, I mean, it's a profound loss, but I'm grateful for my family.
Yeah. I think it's really important to hear all that too, because especially with the passage of time, so many people that listen are in a much, much earlier place than you are, even earlier than I am by a lot. Many of people are in their first days, weeks, months, years. And you and I remember, I mean, I know I'm only 7 years in, but I remember that first year not very much.
Yeah,
Meaning what I
absolutely.
remember is that I don't remember a whole lot. Like I try to think back to some of it. And I always say it's like those old, again, dating myself, but almost like the slideshows, the projectors, where I have these flashes of what that first year was like, almost like the slide gets changed, but I have nothing to fill in the movie, if you will. Like I literally have like flashes. That's what it feels like to
Right.
me from that first year. And so sometimes I still have people say things about conversations or things we did, and it befuddles me that I have no memory of it. And because I'm someone who tends to remember, especially if I'm cued, I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that. If I'm
Absolutely. It's a
and that,
blur.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it's a
blur.
blur.
But
But you know,
I want to say something that I think even surprised myself 19 years ago. And that was, look, I don't blame people because people didn't understand mental health, suicide, but so many people in my own community would say, well, aren't you mad at Steve? He did that to you and your children. He left you. And I tried to explain that no, and it was really no different in terms of there was no choice. I understand it wasn't a choice. And had he had a heart attack, they wouldn't be saying that to me. So, but I tried to be kind. I mean, I don't think they understood. I think they
right.
just didn't understand it.
Right.
So,
And things that we don't understand scare us. And grief is very fear driven anyway. So then you add suicide to it and people are terrified.
they were
They're terrified.
terrified.
Yeah. They're terrified to approach it. They don't know what to do with it. So I have had people of all lost, meaning every relationship on the podcast before. And I know that siblings in general tend to feel like they take a back seat to the pain of the parent. They tend to feel like they're the caretaker of the family, so to speak. They're often called the forgotten mourners. I know that there's more than siblings that fit in that category because friends get forgotten, all things. Unlike me, who dealt with the loss of a child, you and I don't have that same thing. You lost your spouse and you watched your children lose their parent. And so I know that you can't speak directly for each of your kids because they all had very different experiences, but I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about the piece, or at least speak about this and then build into the part where you talked about your family was a little broken for a while, because I will say mine was too. I feel like at 7 years, we are now on what you guys probably went through differently, but the rebuilding of that, the rebuilding of the family unit being, and it is feeling stronger than, but see, that's what I thought was going to stay. I thought that we would be that way from the beginning. And then 3 years in, things started to fall apart with one of my kids, and she chose to take a break from the family, which was devastating to the family. My other child did not. We've remained close. Of course, my brain goes, could that ever change? I suppose it could. It doesn't make sense that it would, but it did make sense that what happened with her did. But it's because this is so complicated. There was so much for her to process, along with all of the other things in life. She was having children, doing all the things that you do, and she's trying to process this extremely complicated grief from a sibling that she was only 15 months different in age from, that she loved dearly. And they all do it so differently that it does cause these tears and rips
Yes.
sometimes. So speak to your family and your kids and kind of what you saw as far as the grieving process. And you talked about there being some breakdown, but then talk about the comeback together too, without betraying any of them, of course.
No, I think, you know what? I think my kid experience is directly related to the age they were. And I think my oldest had said to me a few times, well, gee, why didn't I know more about this? I wasn't trying to hide it, but I just didn't feel like my kid should be in the middle of what was really a tragic and difficult year, as my husband was just not doing well. And they had their own, they were trying to do their things in school. And I felt like my oldest, I could have helped. Perhaps I could have stopped it. That's tough, right? I mean, that's really hard.
Because at 17, you're barely on the cusp of adulthood. I can understand him feeling that way of, why didn't you tell me more, Mom? Or why didn't I know more?
Responsibility. Exactly. I don't think I would have changed anything, though. I think that I was barely equipped to handle it. I would say the next two, who are very close in age, my hope is that they're very close, that they had conversations among themselves. By the way, I think all the kids did have conversations. There's 5 of them, which maybe I wasn't privy to, but maybe it helped them. And then the two youngest, I mean, gosh, I mean, 8 and 10. I mean, we're barely into what they call the age of reason.
Right.
I I don't really know. I know that I think my daughter, it was extremely hard, daughters and fathers. Now today, so in terms of the family unit, well, probably the reason I think things were hard is that I was probably in no position to be a mother and father. Okay, first of all, I was in shock myself, tremendous grief. And second of all, my husband had done a lot of the finances. And I mean, all of a sudden, everything's thrown on my lap
Mm-hmm.
and I have to work. So was I even present?
Right. Probably
Wasn't I
not. Not
even
really.
present? So when I talk about the breakdown, who knows how the kids felt, right? Was I really present as a parent? It took years before I can say that I was getting my act together. I was filling out the FAFSA forms, the dreaded FAFSA forms for college, where I felt like one of my kids reminded me the other day that I kept like a little notebook with like all the
I
bills.
did too.
So I mean, I think it took a number of years, and then probably once my last one was done with college, I was at a place where, okay, one thing I should tell your listeners, and I think this is related to my grief. I moved around a lot. So after my husband died, I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave the state. Too many memories. And I remember at the time my father was still alive and my family lived in Los Angeles. Come back to LA. And I remember my father had these crazy ideas. We'll all get a house together. And oh gosh, this is going to be fun. My father. So I just wanted to escape. I couldn't even go to my local grocery store. Everything reminded me of my grief.
And
But I wasn't going to leave because my kids, that was their home. And they were in high school and middle school. So I stuck it out. But I'll tell you, the second my youngest graduated from high school, I moved. I left and went down to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Some of them were going to University of Michigan. And that was healthy. But then after 4 years there, instead of sort of developing, I moved again, moved to New York City, knowing nobody. I wonder if I'm just still trying to find myself because I feel I was robbed of my future. I was with my husband and I never really figured it out. I was actually engaged once. When you lose a spouse, and I'm sure this is something that people can understand. If you're used to being married, I was married for many years, over 20 years, and I always had boyfriends and partners. Marriage was all I knew. I immediately started I need to be married. I broke off an engagement and thank God I did because how was I going to be a parent and a bride? So no, I never remarried and I think I'm still searching. So
it's such an abrupt and complicated way for our life to take a hard right turn, right? It's not something.
Exactly. You can't explain it to anyone, I think, who hasn't been through it, that immediacy, that shock to the system. But I still want to offer words of encouragement. And that is that time does heal. You do have a way of remembering your loved one in a way that brings a smile to your face, a way that provides you some strength. And I think in my case, an ability to smell the roses a little bit more with my children and just how life is fleeting, can be gone in a minute. So I'm here to say that that's possible.
Yeah, I definitely teach that it's possible to get back to joy and meaning and happiness. I do tell people I'm gonna challenge you on a statement you just said because you said time does heal. I always tell people time doesn't heal anything. Time passes and we have to do the work while it's passing because I think just the passage of time will make it farther away, but I don't think it makes it easier. I think it's what we do with that time that really determines where we're going to be as it passes. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's nothing wrong with the blanket statement, especially with where you're sitting at so much farther in.
Well, I'm so many years.
to
Yeah,
say
I'm so
time
many
has
years.
made a difference. So has it really healed or has it just softened things, right? That's the question. And of course, you have to remember, Abby, that I live in a world of moms mostly,
I
not
understand.
the podcast, not, but all the work I do.
Right.
The podcast listeners are very vast in their loss. Like I have lots of moms, lots of wives, lots of,
Right.
but the world that I work in, the leftover pieces, is exclusively with moms. So my legacy projects, the support groups, they're moms. And so from where moms sit, I have seen evidence that if it's what they do with the time that's important, because otherwise you just end up numb and probably coping badly and all the things. So while time will somehow make this maybe a little less sharp, it doesn't actually do any healing, right? It doesn't heal in itself. It's what we do with the time. Or would you say with you, it is just the passage of time? Because you can challenge me too.
Well, I think it's both. I went to a therapist, very helpful. I did do some of the work, but
you also said you're still a little lost, right? And may always be a little bit lost.
yeah, but the time here's how I feel about the time. Maybe you're right. The time has dulled the pain, but that's important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And also,
it is.
here's what time does for me. Here's my story. For the first 5 or 10 years, that's a long time. So the first 5 years, I couldn't talk about this without bursting into tears. Okay. Or being sick to my stomach.
Right.
I couldn't help others. I was just not there. So what time has allowed me to do, remind you, it's 19 years, is to talk, is to help. That's important. That to me is the significance of time. And I'm not crying right now. I feel it, but I don't feel it in that pain, that sharp pain. So if I can talk about it and help others, and certainly as we'll maybe get some time to talk about on the legislative political front, like let's get something done here. I was in no position to do that 10 years ago. 15
yeah.
years.
Well, that leads really well into what I was kind of getting at, which is your why, because many people listening might say, because I can imagine I could think this too, is what is your why for 19 years, almost 20 years in, still wanting to talk about suicide, still wanting to have conversations that make a difference, still wanting to talk about things that might be legislative or whatever, when many people would say, your husband died 20 years ago, like, just move on, lady. Like, why do you keep scraping? And I can throw this back at myself, right? I do feel like people still look at me and say, well, I feel like they look at me and say, oh, look at Melissa. She's doing all this stuff. She can't let go of her son's death. Well, first of all, I'm never going to let go of his death because I'm not letting go of him. That'd be like saying she can't let go of her daughter's life. She talks to her daughter every day. She can't let go. To me, that's akin to that, right? So people can think whatever they want, but the reality is my why is that other grievers have to know that it doesn't have to be as lonely as it feels, because it is one of the most isolating deaths that you can possibly have. But it doesn't have to be that lonely, and there is help out there, right? So I just feel driven for people to understand that, because I went through 3 years feeling like a blind mouse running into walls and not know. I looked pretty good on the outside. Inside, I was a lost mess.
This is a great question. And there are people that, if even they don't say it to me publicly, they're thinking, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with her? Like, get a life. That's why you aren't dating. That's why you haven't. First of all, for me personally, I have a good skill set. All right. I'm a lawyer. I worked in politics at a very high level, presidential on down. I know an awful lot of politicians. I can pick up a phone or make an email and have them listen. So I think it's my duty to take a role in this issue. I mean, I think I mentioned to you, after my husband died, I couldn't even talk about it. So that was not the time. And I think it was 2017, I wrote a guest editorial for our statewide newspaper. And I followed up by doing some radio. And the topic I wrote about, I did follow up with a meeting with a legislator. Your listeners might find it interesting. I have been thinking a lot. I know in Michigan, I don't know in the rest of the country, but in many states, there are two health codes. There's a public health code and a mental health code. Drives me crazy, because this was written back in like the late 1800s, when we had hospitals that had people chained, right? Then understand mental health. And I say to myself, as long as we have that distinction in our code, for example, in Michigan, the public health and the mental health, the body, it's the same body, it's health. So I wrote an intro saying, you know what, to reduce the stigma, it's just health, people. It's not public health and mental health. It's one body and one brain. Well, for fun, I call this fun, I met with a legislator in Lansing, and they said, oh, that's great. That sounds great. We can't do that. I mean, I wanted them to amend the code to just put it under one name. Well, the reason they can't do it is once you open up any legislation to redo it, then you opening it up for lots of amendments. And okay, so I get it. Can't be done. But that got me on some radio show. That got me talking about the stigma. So that's how I feel I could be helpful. I mean, people will listen to me because of my story, right? I've been there, but also because I think I understand how to influence others. And I won't stop. I mean, I'm going to use my skill set. And sadly, I was sort of hoping back in 2004 that I wouldn't really need to have this discussion almost 20 years later, that I would see a sea change in how schools and other people deal with mental health and suicide. Maybe it's a tiny bit more because we have celebrities like Anthony Bourdain and people that have died by suicide. But honestly, like you say, Melissa, you scratch beneath the surface, not much has changed.
Right. And I hear some people saying, of course, it's people that maybe weren't aware of the mental health world at all before the loss of suicide of a even more peripheral person, meaning, people that knew Alex, but didn't know him,
Right.
like they weren't our inner family or whatever. Those people say things like, but I see there's a lot more change now. I think they're really getting there. And I always say, we're not where we should be. We're not where we should be. The people that want to say, oh, well, my workplace now allows us 2 mental health days.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I go to them, I say to them, that is so not where we should be. That's just a accommodation. That's not even a real effort.
It's just for show.
It's 100
for show.
It's what I said to you earlier when we are off camera to use the term. That's their sexy message to their employees, right? To say, oh, and we care. You get 2 days off that you get to just choose when you're sad, and that'll take care of you the rest. That's their way.
And suicide is still, correct me if I'm wrong, the number 1 or 2 cause of death for young people, ages like 12 to 22, I read. I mean,
it's number 2.
Yeah, the numbers
it's firmly seated. And actually for some ages, and I think we're going to see this change as we see the data come out for COVID, because meaning during the COVID years, because we're only at 2023 now. I know we're getting close to knocking on the door of 2024, but we're going to hang on to 2023. 2020 is when the pandemic started. Mm-hmm. Most data in the suicide world runs a minimum of 2 and usually 3 to 4 years behind. So we're just now starting to see the trickles of early COVID statistics come in. I've been telling people for a while that when we see the real statistics, and that's a misnomer too, because there are no real statistics for suicide because so many people still misreport it, don't acknowledge it, don't want it on the death certificate. There's a lot of misreporting to the CDC about death.
I have to interrupt and ask you.
Yes, please do.
So at least in the last 20 years, I've noticed when somebody dies by suicide and you read the obituary, it'll often say dies unexpectedly. People don't. What's your thought about that? I mean, obviously every family has their own decision to make, but I feel like it kind of furthers the stigma a little bit. What do you think?
100%. And it'll sound controversial, but it's my podcast, so I can sound controversial.
Yeah, go ahead. I really wanted your opinion on that.
I think that it's horribly stigmatizing to have this happen. I actually feel like in the last 6 months, I've been frustrated with a couple of celebrity deaths that I felt have been hiding behind the stigma when they could make a choice to come out. I feel like we can stand on a pedestal. I'm not in a glass house throwing stones. When Alex died, I wrote his obituary. I don't remember writing it, but I've read it. And I led with, on August 7th of 2016, Alex ended his life at college. I did not hide from it from the very beginning because you know why? It didn't occur to me I'm not ashamed of my son. I'm not ashamed of anything that happened because this wasn't something like you said that even in my DNA, I knew it wasn't his fault at that point. People have asked me if I was angry.
Right.
I get angry at Alex in moments the same as I did when he was alive. There's moments that I go, God damn it, Alex, you should be here. Like my brain. And I have that moment of maternal anger of, why aren't you here? Or why aren't you here for your brother? But I've never been angry at him ever for leaving the way he did, because I doesn't feel any more his fault than if he had gotten a terminal diagnosis or been in a car accident or been murdered.
Same.
It wasn't a choice. And so I didn't think to hide behind it. But then you see these celebrities who, and some of them do it correctly, meaning some of them, their families come out and talk about mental. Naomi Judd, her family talked about,
they did a great job. I remember I tweeted to them.
They did immediately talk about mental illness. Our mother succumbed to mental illness. The word suicide wasn't used right away, but they didn't hide from that this was suicide.
They did a good job, but you're so right. Celebrities, particularly celebrities, because so many people,
not all of them. Robin Williams' family didn't hide from it. Not all of them. Anthony Bourdain's family didn't hide from it.
Some do.
We still don't know the official cause of Sinead O'Connor's death, and yet we all know.
Oh, exactly. So I think that's really important to encourage. I mean, look, I get it. Families are suffering and they're in a place where, oh my gosh. But honestly, like a lot of them probably had an inkling. I know in Sinead O'Connor's world, they said
they did. Suffering. And that's the point. They're saying everything but saying she died by suicide, which does nothing but hugely magnify how horribly stigmatizing this is. So we can't actually say the word. We can't say she ended her life, or even they could even say it appears that she may have ended her life. They're just saying no suspicion, death cause unknown. And then the rest of us that live in the suicide loss world just hang our head and go, so we wonder why everybody hides from this. We wonder why everybody goes, not suicide. I mean, seriously, we're making it worse.
Oh, absolutely. I often have told people when I've gotten a little irritated and people understand, I say suicide is often perhaps not always, but the foreseeable, I'm using my lawyer language, foreseeable result of or undertreated depression. In other words, just like if you have a clogged artery, are you going to be surprised when somebody has a heart attack?
Right.
No. So I'm going to keep pushing for that. It's really important. And one thing I didn't mention, which you probably talked about in your program, but so my husband, I told you, went to Harvard, and he and I used to actually kind of joke about this, that there's a Harvard curse. And what I mean by that is when you go to Harvard, you're on top of the world. Okay. And you have these expectations that life is going to turn out a certain way. I mean, Harvard, I think to a certain extent, maybe kind of promotes that. Well, his Harvard buddies, I don't think they get it. Okay. I mean, I love them all, but I think some of these type A guys that have been driven their whole life, they need to have an education. They need to have an education and see that it's not a sign of weakness. And yet in my husband's case, I don't think he felt like he could talk to any of them.
Right.
Truly. So, I mean, that's a whole nother area. But
it is. Yeah. Important. Some of it is us tiptoeing around the edges of, because I could go into, my son was where your husband would have been. I mean, not at Harvard, but he was in college, in a fraternity, in a leadership position. All of the stresses that he graduated with an international baccalaureate high school diploma. He was at a rigorous private college academically. Right. And so when you talk about all the pressures that are there, and yet my son was in a fraternity surrounded by quote unquote brotherhood, where were his brothers when he needed them the most? Right. So he was on the other side of it, where your husband had built those bonds and then should have had them through his life. And yet he
had them, but only when times were good.
Right. I was going to say only for the world. Yeah, exactly. But not for the other side, which is always interesting. And so, we're skirting around the edge of more difficult topics that will be for another day and time. Yes. But we both have them, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, it is.
So your why today, what I heard you say, if you wrap up your why, and then I want to do two more things. I want to make sure we touch base on anything else you feel like that we need to. And then I want you to end with some helpful thoughts for our listeners. But I want to talk a little bit more about you saying that your why after all this time is that, one, you had to get out of the time when you weren't physically and mentally able to do this kind of work, because we know it's just too hard in the early years. Some of it you just can't do. And I always tell people, some of them that start to get an inkling really early on, they want to make a difference, just to be really careful how much they take on, because you're still going to be really delicate for a while of doing the grief work and the healing. And
Absolutely.
so your why sounds to me like, one, your life forever changed, and this is part of what changed it. And like me, you have this sense of responsibility and duty, if you will, to do as much as you can, because we can't go back and change what's happened to us. It's only how we respond to it that matters. And so the people that want to say, this isn't me coping, I'd say this is me coping on steroids. This is exactly how I'm coping with the loss. I don't want Alex's life to be in vain. I feel like because he died the way he did, I have, as his mother, a responsibility to do something with that too. And so I feel like that's what you're saying, is now that you are on good footing, you said you started, 6-7 years ago, you were 13 years in, for the most part, your kids were raised, all that stuff. So you were able to then say, now I might have some strength and really be able to make an impact. Is that fair to say? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes. And also in the last 6-7 years, I looked at running for office again. I was on the school board years ago, and I may still do it. I have, as I said, the background, the education to do that. Sadly, our political system makes it pretty rough unless you can raise a couple $1,000,000, and I'm not planning on doing that. So this is a way to do it without having to be in office. And this is something we'll get to when I talk about how people can be helpful when you're ready, and you've got to do the grief work. I wasn't ready for 13, 14 years. There are so many ways to get involved, and you don't have to spend a dime. And once again, I'll put it out there. I have people reach out to me just because I'm kind of public, social media, and I've over the years have asked for my help. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to go there. And the other thing is, I can't mention the hospital. I did deal with some litigation, which, once again, hey, it's not because I'm a lawyer. If there is negligence in this world, you are helping others. You're helping others, if it's applicable, to take a step. So I don't think people should feel badly if they say, there were some other people that had an effect or an impact on what happened to my child, my spouse.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay. Oh, well, another thing that I want to say that I think would be helpful, that I learned the hard way, is that while you are going through your grief, especially in the first months, it's really important to try to involve your extended family. Now, that's going to be hard, because some of them, like my father, just like didn't get it. He was like, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm so sad, but how could he do that to you, kind of thing. But after he got through that, he was really helpful and supportive. I mean, I think that sometimes when we're in a tremendous grief, we tend to, at least I rolled up in a ball, curled a ball, and got in bed. It's really helpful to get that support system, even if it seems hard, even if you've been estranged from a family member. This is when you need them most. So I can't say that enough.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. And you're right about, you said something about the responsibility if there's negligence. I think the only thing I want to say to that is, having been, without having talked about it a lot, having had the same situation, as far as there was a negligent situation, there was some responsible parties, and there are people that chose to look at me wanting to draw attention to that in a negative or self-serving way when it felt like my responsibility. And I appreciate you being able to say that as someone else who's had a responsible finger to point to say, listen, because I've said that over and over again, Abby. I've said, but you don't understand this particular situation. There are people that need to be held accountable. There's answers that need to be known, and it's to benefit the people that are still here that we need to do it.
100%. You know, when you're talking about care, treatment, doctors, in my case, hospitals, we're talking about saving a future life. And I know that a lot of people, still a lot of people in this country, don't understand suicide. And they think, well, they were going to do it anyway. What difference does it make with the doctors or hospital? No, it does make a lot of difference. Okay. It really does. So that's a side note. But the most important thing to do is one last thing I want to say, take care of your health. Not you. I mean, I'm saying to the listeners.
Well, you can say it to me too, because it applies.
After my husband died, I was always getting cold and sick. I wasn't taking care of myself. Then I carried it to the extreme. Then I thought, every time I coughed, I ran to the doctor, because if something happened to me, my kids were going to be orphans.
Right.
So I went the other direction, and it's taken years, by the way. I felt if I could just get my kids to an age where they're adults. So, I mean, it just goes without saying, just take care of yourself.
Well, I think we've touched on a whole lot of really important stuff. I feel like we have 10 more conversations in us for other times and other days, because this could go so many directions. But as we wrap up, I want to make sure there's no points you have wanted to make that you haven't had a chance. And once you have gotten to where you feel like that you've shared everything you want to share, I'd like to just end today by any helpful thoughts that you have for listeners that you want to leave them with today.
I think, oh boy, this is so tough.
It is, right?
I mean, suicide is one of the hardest things, but I just think that had I had people to turn to back in 2004 where I didn't feel alone, I didn't know anybody who had a family member die by suicide. It wasn't talked about. There were no resources like, Melissa, what you're providing. I just think it's the most important thing I can say is surround yourself with people, with knowledge, with books, with podcasts, so that you don't feel alone. That's what I can say. That's just really important.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to pause there for a minute. I want you to speak to how and when people know how to be helpful. Meaning, you said you wanted to try to give advice on telling people how they could be helpful once they're at a place that they're able to be helpful.
Oh, okay. Right. This is really important. So, like in my case, I reached out to local legislators when I had ideas or things that I thought might be helpful. But in the case of, it's really, everybody's situation is different. But if you are feeling up to it, you can meet with your local school board. You can write a few letters to your local paper and just put into words the things that you think would have helped you, would help other people in this case. I mean, I think that's a really good way to get involved. And just getting the word out there. I think those of us that have had the experience are the ones that can help others that are going through it, and others that
could go through it.
Right? Could go through it. So,
well, I love that. I love that you're saying speak out, write about it, talk about it. I'll go so far as to say just have powerful conversations in your community, even if that means one-on-one at coffee shops. As survivors, I think we do have a responsibility of some level, and everybody chooses where to put that. But I think everybody has some responsibility to bring this into the light and out of the shadows so that we can stop losing so many people to suicide, so that more people can get to this before they're in crisis and not in their life, but also so those of us that are already here can live a more powerful life with this, alongside the sadness that's just going to be there, but being able to retool and reimagine a new life. And I think that doing something about it, being a voice, gives you that ability to do that.
Yes. And I want to say one more thing. My husband had run for office. He was successful in the Harbor Springs City Council. He ran for Congress, wasn't successful, ran for state rep. But if he were with me right now, I think he'd be really proud that I have continued, right, the political action, the political work in his honor to try to make a difference. So that's my personal mission.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I love the mission but I do not love the reason. I'm sorry that we're here together for this reason.
Very sorry.
But I'm so thankful for this conversation. I look forward to hopefully having future conversations. And I appreciate you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Grievers, it is my hope that from today you will take that which serves you and simply leave the rest. I would love to connect with you, and the best way to do that is to start out on my website, where the first thing you'll find is a video recorded message from me. And then from there, you can find everything I offer: the online Zoom support groups, the books I've written, ways to connect for the podcast, and an entire resource library assembled to help all suicide loss grievers find the resources that they need to help them along their healing journey. Please go to theleftoverpieces.com. From there, I hope that we can connect, and I hope that you too can discover that we truly are better together. If anything that you've heard in today's episode resonates with you, I would ask that you please subscribe to get notified every week of my new episodes. And then take a moment to rate and review me on Apple Podcasts so that more grievers like us can find this podcast and this community. It is from my own experience of finding myself sitting amid the leftover pieces of my own shattered heart that I can tell you that while it seems impossible in the early days, it is possible to put those pieces back together and be okay again. And every week, we'll be right here providing more comfort, hope, and community. So until next week, I'll sign off today with some words from one of my Alex's favorites, Peter Pan. Never say goodbye, because goodbye means going away, and going away means forgetting. Grievers, no one here's forgetting. Talk soon.